Nine. All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Those of you on the live stream, thank you guys for joining us. A little shout out to my parents. They're here as well. My dad coming in from Utah, and my mom, beautiful mom. Many of you know her. Many of you have had her tamales and her tortillas. And Yana, my niece Yana, looks dead on like Yvette. She probably don't like to say. She probably don't like to hear it, but I see her, and I see your mom. So as we know, as we all know, we're coming up on Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, the only other day of the year that our church CEOs come out. Our Christmas and Easter only visitors. That's our church CEOs. So for the next few weeks up until Resurrection Sunday, I would like us to take a closer look at Jesus and his ministry, the things he did, the miracles he performed, things he said, the parables and the examples that he blessed us with, that he left us with, and with leading up to his finished work on the cross. So make sure to follow along on the live stream. Follow along these next. You're not going to want to miss out. If you're here in attendance, you're not going to want to miss out. So be sure to join us on this journey as we just go through pretty much the synoptic gospels in John and just follow that journey that Christ led us on and his experience on the cross. So for this afternoon, we're going to get into the miracle which involved Jesus healing a man that was born blind. And some of you may know the story. You're probably familiar, and if you've been in church for some time, it was when Jesus spits on the ground. When he spits on the ground and he makes the mud, he makes the clay, and he rubs it on the blind man's eyes, and he tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam, and he goes and the man's healed. So many of you are probably familiar with that story. So let us take a look at the text. We'll be going into this afternoon, and if you would meet me in John chapter 9, verse 1 through 6, that's my bicep coming out, 1 through 6, 1 through 6. So John 9, 1 through 6. Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. Verse 4, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay. So, as we get into this word, there's a few things that stood out. And to understand the scope of what is going on here, we have to get a bird's eye view of the story here. And if you were to read the previous chapter 8, you would see that pretty much that entire chapter, the Pharisees and the religious leaders of that time, of that day, were disputing who Jesus is. They were disputing his identity. They were his claim of who his father was, and even though many of you know the story when the heavens had opened up and the dove came down and remained on Jesus, but now it's on Pastora's flowers. The dove came down and the claim was made, right? It's in Mark 1:11. You are my beloved son. When the heavens opened, you are my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. And through all this, his identity was still being questioned by the religious leaders, the religious folks of that day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So the claim of being the Son of God was made and was questioned the moment Jesus steps back on the scene. not only by Satan in the desert, but by the religious leaders of that day. So from the day you are born, from the day you are born, your identity is under fire. Your greatest weapon, if you remember we preached a sermon on identity several months ago. The greatest weapon is knowing that you are a son, that you are a daughter of the Almighty. Having that knowledge, accepting that knowledge, and owning that knowledge, it's like Thor's hammer, right? Thor's strong. Thor's got superhuman strength, right? And he can cause damage. But man, when he gets that hammer, that's the knowledge of your identity is that the addition of Thor's hammer, right? If I can give you a Marvel explanation. So if you think about it, many of the struggles we face today, as well as many of our shortcomings and poor decisions we make, they stem from a lack of identity or portraying a false identity. Just knowing who we are. How many of us can look ourselves in the mirror and truly know the person looking back at us? You know, if I can be transparent with you guys, if I can be just brutally honest, for a long time, you know, my identity was in what I could provide. In what I could provide. I believe that to be the case for most of us men in here. You know, it's a common thing for us to think that way, to have that mindset, and unfortunately for majority of us, it's a societal construct that we've fallen victim to. We must learn our true identity. We must learn, know, and accept the fact that we are sons and daughters of the Most High. For me personally, it wasn't until I accepted and I owned my position as a son that I experienced true freedom. It wasn't until then that I experienced true freedom. And when I've spoken on sonship before, I shared a book, Spiritual Slavery to Spiritual Sonship, and it's by Jack Frost, not the snowman, but it's an author. So that's a book. Hit me up if you forget it or if you don't write it down, whatever. But it's that book really transformed my understanding and perception on what it is to be a son, to be a child of God, and to actually own it, to really find freedom through the knowledge of that. You are exactly who the Father says you are. And that is His son, that is His daughter, and that is His beloved. And that's my prayer for you. That's my prayer for you, that you would know your true identity. Not as a provider, not as your job, not as your hobby, not as your golf score handicap, not as your gym membership, but that of a son and that of a daughter. So let's see what Jesus is telling us in this passage. He saw a man who was blind from birth. He saw a man who was blind from birth, and the disciples asked, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? How can a man who was born blind be blamed for his sin? Like, he was born blind, right? Like that. But that was a popular belief in those times. And that if something negative, something was going on in your life, it was because of something you had did wrong. If there was an affliction, it was a sin that you were in. If it was health or otherwise, it was because you were living in sin. And you know, we tell our kids that, you know, to this day, like, if something's going on, like, what are you doing wrong? Are you doing something you're not supposed to? Pastora says it all the time to our kids. You're probably doing something you're not. You got a flat tire, probably because you're doing something you're not. You're probably going somewhere you weren't supposed to go. We still do it. So, but all jokes aside, some of us actually do have that belief, and we've partnered with that lie. We've partnered with the lie and we've convinced ourselves that it's truth. Right. That what's going on today and what I'm going through is because God is punishing me. But can I tell you that God doesn't work like that? That's not how God works. And of course there's consequences. Of course there's consequences to our actions, but at the same time, there's a grace that God has provided for us to be able to face them, to face those consequences, and He's provided us forgiveness to get past them, and a testimony to give someone else hope to persevere through their situation because they see you, they've witnessed you overcoming yours. So let's look at verse 3. Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him." He shuts it down real quick. He shuts that mindset down real quick and responds with, "Neither. Neither have sinned. This happened so that the works of God might be revealed in him." Come on, somebody. If you're going through something this afternoon, there's purpose attached to that pain. There is a reason for the resistance that you're coming up against. The resistance that's coming up against you. John Piper said it perfectly. It was a clip in a song, but it was in one of his sermons, and you probably know the song. It's a Shane and Shane song, but John Piper says, there's a clip of John Piper, and he says, "Not only is your affliction momentary, not only is all of your affliction light in comparison to eternity and the glory thereof, but all of it is totally meaningful. Every second of your misery, of your pain in the path of obedience is producing a peculiar glory that you will receive. Whatever it is you're facing, it isn't meaningless. It's doing something even if you don't see it. It's doing something. It's working for you in an eternal glory, an eternal weight of glory. Therefore, do not lose heart, but take this truth and preach this word into your mind until your heart sings with confidence that you are cared for, that you are loved, that you are a son, that you are a daughter." It's happening to you. Whatever it is, it's happening to you so that the works of God may be glorified in you. You overcoming that sickness, you overcoming that addiction is the hope for someone else. It's the hope for your children. It's the epigenetic trait that will not be passed down to your children. The transgenerational risk factors that will stop with you. In other words, generational curses, you are breaking. You are breaking. I just brought that scientific term first because some people have a problem with generational curses, generational iniquity. But I wanted to bring scientific proof first, right? So you can see that this is, and it's a message we spoke on before on generational iniquities. The scientific term is epigenetics. Transgenerational risk factors that stop with you. Epigenetic. EPI genetic. Transgenerational risk factors that will stop with you breaking generational curses. Are you passing these traits down to your children? Are you breaking strongholds of addiction, of alcoholism, of pride, of infidelity? Are you ridding your bloodline of it? Are you ridding your bloodline of it? You overcoming that depression and anxiety is the hope for your children. You overcoming the depression and anxiety is the hope for someone in your life to continue on. There's always someone watching. There's always someone watching. Regardless of what you think about yourself, regardless if I don't feel like I'm walking right, you don't feel like it, there's always someone in your life watching you. How are you showing your children how are you showing them to overcome adversity? When we throw in the towel every time. Be an overcomer. Be an overcomer, because there's people in your life that are watching you walk through storms. They're watching you walk through your storm or storms in your past, and they're watching you come out on the other side victorious, and it's giving them hope to continue on. It's giving them hope to live. It's giving them hope to fight and not throw in the towel. And you don't even know it. It could be a nephew, it could be a friend, it could be a coworker that you really don't have a relationship, but someone's watching you because they know you serve Jesus. How's he going to get through this? How's she going to get through this? Someone's watching you. It's happening to you so the works of God might be revealed in you. I know it's hard work in restoring your marriage. Trust us, we know. We know. But your marriage being restored is going to be the result of countless children having both parents in the home and not having to go back and forth between homes, between mom's house and dad's house. The works of God that will be revealed in the restoration of your marriage is giving hope to those around you. It's giving hope to that one person that has the divorce papers in hand ready to file. Your affliction is momentary. It's producing an eternal glory. It's happening to you so that the works of God might be revealed in you. Just as the blind man. Just as the blind man. So if we look at verse 6. Let's look at verse 6. When he had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva. And he anointed the eyes of the blind man with clay. Throughout Jesus' ministry, we see him use three methods to heal. We see him heal with the word, right? Blind Bartimaeus. We see him heal with a touch when he touched the lepers. We see him heal from a distance, right? The centurion's servant healed from a distance. Didn't even have to go to his place. This time Jesus heals totally different. This time he spits on the ground. He spits on the ground and he makes clay with the saliva. He rubs it in the man's eyes. And we've talked about before, several weeks ago, about really paying attention to Jesus when he says or he does these things. Remember we talked about the fig tree when he cursed it. And really paying attention to when he does something or you read something he says or does, and it makes you go, remember the Arsenio Hall show. Things that make you go, Because we talk to ourselves. We talk to hear ourselves. We talk to hear ourselves. We like the sound of our own voice, and we talk aimlessly, so there isn't no awkward silence in the elevator. How about them Dodgers, They just beat the A's, so. But whenever Jesus spoke, it was always on purpose for a purpose. Whenever Jesus spoke, it was never aimlessly. It wasn't just so there wasn't that awkward silence. It was important to know the traditions and customs of his audience to truly understand when he's saying something. To truly get the gist of what he was communicating in this passage, we got to know the traditions and the customs of that time. Jesus had a specific reason. And we've spoken about this before, right? It's a specific reason for his actions. And he knew that he would be fully understood by the Jews that witnessed it. See, for us, when we read it through our Western perspective, it just looks like Jesus spat on the ground and it was a different way of healing, right? Maybe he did it so they wouldn't think of it as a pattern. Oh, every time he heals, he does it this way. So now I'm going to do it so maybe it'll work. No, it was a specific reason for his actions. And if we can put if we can put ourselves in the shoes or the chanclas of the Jews of that time, because they were chanclas, of a first century Jew in Palestine and knowledgeable of the oral traditions and the Hebrew scriptures, we'll get a better understanding of why Jesus used mud and spit to heal this man. Remember, context is always key, right? We spoke about that before with the fig tree, the cursing of the fig tree. Context is always key to understanding Scripture. And if we take a broader view of the whole story, then the pieces of the puzzle will come together. So earlier I mentioned in the previous chapter, in chapter 8, how the Pharisees were challenging Jesus' identity, always pointing out the traditions and laws that he constantly broke, right? How many times do we read about the Pharisees getting their chonies in a bunch because he healed on the Sabbath, or his disciples weren't fasting, or his disciples weren't washing their hands, and so on and so forth. They're always in his mix about that. And we must remember, we must know that Jesus didn't have a problem with the Torah or the traditions, right? If you go to Matthew 5:17, Do not think that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. So recognize he never had a problem with the Torah or the traditions. Jesus had a problem with the Pharisees placing so much weight on the people and making it almost impossible or burdensome for them to follow these customs and traditions, yet they didn't follow these laws themselves, right? If we go to Matthew 23, the next slide. You got 23 up there, Mia? There it is. For they bind heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. So it's not that he had a problem with the Torah and the traditions and the customs. It was his problem more with the hypocriticalness of the Pharisees, right? And we spoke about that too, about the fig tree, right, a couple weeks ago. So it wasn't his problem with the Torah or anything like that. It was just a hypocrisy of the religious leaders of that time. So these traditions and these laws even regulated where you can spit. You getting it, right? Where you can spit. So now you see there's a reason behind why he spat. So the Mishnah Torah, which is translated the reiteration of the law, or the second Torah. So that consists of 14 books divided into sections and chapters and paragraphs, kind of like the Bible, right? It's a 14-volume legal code of Jewish beliefs and practices. And one of the laws is that if you're walking around on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, and you need to spit, you need to wait till you see a rock or a tree. Because if you spat on the ground, your saliva would make mud, make clay. And if it's Shabbat, if it's the Sabbath, it was forbidden to make clay. It was forbidden to make clay on Shabbat. But Jesus spat on the ground. Jesus would have known this. Jesus would have known this law. He would have known this law. He would have known this law, and even knowing this, he intentionally spit on the ground, formed the clay, rubbed it in the man's eyes, and he healed them. He did this to show the Pharisees how misconstrued their priorities were. Jesus knew that they would be more interested in him spitting on the ground during Shabbat, during the Sabbath, than him actually healing a man that was born blind. They would put more weight on what he did wrong. Jesus intentionally uses spit to heal this man. And we know he did it on several other occasions, right? He spits on the blind man's eyes and it just spits on him, and then he heals a deaf mute by spitting as well, by using saliva to heal. So there's a pattern here. There's a pattern here that as I'm reading this, it's making me go, By using saliva to heal, Jesus is making a powerful statement about his identity. Remember, I said earlier that if you read the previous chapter, in the chapter 8, it's the Pharisees challenging his identity, challenging who his father was, challenging who his father is. So if we can bring up John 8:18 through 19. I am one who bears witness to myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness of me. Then they said to him, where is your father? Jesus answered, you know neither me nor my Father. If you had known me, you would also have known my Father as well. So the first part of that is the witness. So you catch it. So I'm one who bears witness to myself, and the Father who bears witness to me. So if you go back to the laws of that time and the traditions and two witnesses. For something to be truth, you needed two witnesses. So he's telling them right here, I'm the Father's son, and I'm the witness, he's my witness. So he's telling them, like, this is what it is. Yet they ask, where is your father? Because you got to remember, why can't I say that? Illegitimate. Okay. Not knowing who your baby daddy is was a big deal in biblical times. And occasionally one son would contest the claim of the other as to who's the genuine heir. So think of Abraham and why he sent Ishmael away. So when Isaac was born, there would be no question of the inheritance, right? So Jewish tradition during the Herodian temple, the second temple period, taught that God had a test. That God had a test that would supernaturally reveal who was the legitimate firstborn son. So if we go back to this book, the Bava Batra, the section of the Talmud, which also consists of the one we spoke of earlier, the Mishnah that we learned of earlier, it deals with, that section, the Bava Batra, deals with property laws. And it records a case of two men trying to settle a dispute, of which of them was the firstborn. They were fighting, I'm the firstborn of my father. No, they didn't have birth certificates. You couldn't call Fresno Community and get a copy of your birth certificate. So it was disputed. So they were fighting over who's the firstborn. So the rabbi takes these two men. The rabbi takes these two men to a blind man, and he has the first man spit in the blind man's eye. Nothing happened. So then he gets the second man, spits in the blind man's eye, and the blind man sees. The blind man receives the sight, and the rabbi says, and he declares, the second son is the firstborn. Tradition says that the saliva of a firstborn son has the power to cure blindness. Come on, are you seeing this? No pun intended, no pun intended. The Pharisees were questioning Jesus on who his father was, and he responded by quoting their own law to them. Their own law to them. He quoted their own law to them. Bear witness to myself, and I bear witness to him. Quoted their own law to them. And when that didn't satisfy, Jesus demonstrated proof by putting their own tradition to the test when he spat in the ground. When he spat in the ground and healed the blind man, which was the test that they were all aware of. Because they know the story, they know the Mishnah, they know what it meant when he spit and it cured the blind man. That was proof that he was the Son of God. And as we read with this modern day Western perspective that we have, we just see an example of Jesus healing a blind man, right? Using mud, performing another miracle. Yeah, it's a weird way of going about it, but hey, that's Jesus. Who are we to ask? But when you get a greater understanding, and I was talking about this, me and my dad were talking about this earlier, is when we can read through Hebrew eyes, when we see the Bible through Hebrew eyes, and when we understand and know the Jewish traditions and customs, we then can see what the Jews of that day were witnessing. What they were witnessing, what it meant when Jesus spat. Jesus didn't spit in the ground and heal this man. He was making a bold statement. That was just an example. He was making a bold statement that I am the firstborn I am the Son of God. God is my Father. Jesus was saying to the religious leaders, you have questioned who my Father is. Now you know. I am his firstborn son and rightful heir to the kingdom. Come on, I'm preaching a whole lot better than you shouting. Danicia, you can come on up now. So myself and Danicia, as well as my other daughters, we're all into true crime. We listen to Crime Junkies, Morbid, your pastora don't like it, Rotten Mango, all that stuff. The documentaries, Jeffrey Dahmer. I've been into it since I was a kid. I guess I passed it on to my kids. And when you have 3 girls, you have to be strategic like that. Okay? For those of you dads that have daughters, you have to be strategic about that. It makes them aware and it makes them vigilant, especially now that they're older, they're living their own lives, they're going to school, they're driving, and I'm not always going to be there with them when they're walking out of work and through parking lots and getting out of work late. So our true crime passion is strategic. Our passion for true crime is strategic. Plus, If their husbands get to acting a fool, then, well, accidents happen, people disappear. We know what to do to not get caught. So for my daughters and I, true crime isn't entertainment for us, it's preparation. It's preparation. And who's here into true crime? Is anybody else into true crime? Yeah. So then as every true crime fan knows, it's all about the DNA. It's all body fluids. It's the saliva. Live stream, type it in the comments. It's all in the saliva. Y'all ready for the final piece of this puzzle? So many of you are probably familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're ancient Jewish manuscripts that were found in the Qumran caves in the West Bank on the northern shore of the Dead Sea. They were discovered over a period of 10 years from 1946 to 1956. Fascinating discovery. I highly recommend it if you're not familiar with it. And these findings, they contain the oldest known manuscripts of the books of the Bible. Extremely accurate, which is crazy, extremely accurate. And within these findings, there were other books and other writings, extra biblical works that preserved evidence of the diversity of religious thoughts, of religious thought during Jesus' time. And one of these books was called The Rule of Community. And there's a poem that I want to, and there's a verse from that poem that I want to read to you guys this afternoon. And this book, it talks about human nature. And it states in this poem, this verse, it says, "What shall one born of a woman be considered in your presence? Shaped from the dust has been. What shall humankind be considered in your presence? Shaped from the dust he has been. He spat saliva, molded clay, and for dust is his longing." In Jesus' time, the human body was considered to be made up from dirt, earth, molded clay, and spat saliva. That's what the poem was about. Who's taking 23andMe? Or had to give a DNA test because you were in jail? They get the saliva from the inside of your mouth with a Q-tip swab. Chemically, the human body is made up of elements that are found in the earth. Our genetic code and everything that makes up who we are is consistent in our saliva. It's contained in our saliva. Come on, are you guys seeing this now? We have Jesus here spitting on the ground, healing a man and proving that he is the Son of God. There's more than meets the eye in this story about saliva. And I'm closing with this. I'm closing with verse 7. I didn't give you one for me. I'll just read it. I'm closing with verse 7. "Go," he told him, "wash in the pool of Siloam." So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Jesus told him to go to a specific place to wash. A specific place, the pool of Siloam. Go wash in the pool of Siloam. Go wash your eyes out. And it was believed that it was about a 70-yard hike. And not a straight shot. Not a straight shot. He was near the temple, so he had to go through the court of the Gentiles. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. He had to go through the court of the Gentiles, through some doorways, down some stairs, and then it wasn't a straight shot. It was a journey, and he's still blind, right? Because he didn't heal him right then and there. He put mud on his eyes and he said, "Go wash in the pool." He had to walk through the court of the Gentiles, the doorway, the temple, and it was no easy task for a blind man, as you can imagine. He had to go to a specific place and do what Jesus told him to do, and do it in faith. Because remember, Jesus didn't say he was healed. It wasn't like the other miracles, the other healings where your faith has made you whole. Be healed. No, he said, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." And that's it. He didn't say you're healed. He said, just go wash. So even though Jesus did the work, the man still had to respond in faith. He still had to respond in faith. And what has God been working on in your lives? What have you been praying for? What's in your life that needs a touch from God? a wayward child, your marriage, your job, yourself, your own walk? Could it be that God has already moved in that situation? He's just waiting for you to have a greater response in faith? And as I close and before we dismiss to the mixer, I just want to give someone an opportunity. Anyone that feels the opportunity to demonstrate that greater response in faith. God has done His part. I promise you, God has done His part already. Now it's our turn to metaphorically make our way to the pool of Siloam and wash the mud out of our eyes so that we can have sight. That can be done from your seat. That can be done up at the altar. If you would like someone to pray with you, we're going to have the prayer team come up here, and they would love to catch hands with you and pray for the mud that needs to be washed off your eyes. So as we close this afternoon, consider yourself dismissed. Consider yourself dismissed. And again, if you need to metaphorically wash the mud out your eyes, we will pray for you. You can do it from your seat. You can come on up. And that's my time for this afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to stop by the mixer, get some birthday cake. Wish Pastora a happy birthday. Thank you guys for joining us this afternoon.